Allen Lund Company has new offices in Ogden, Utah and Indianapolis, Indiana. Check allenlund.com to reach them.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Scott Thompson.
Welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us. We'll jump into the news of the day here in just a moment, but first, a quick preview of what else we have in store for you today. Starting with the aftermath of a crash. There's nothing good about being involved in one, but if you happen to find yourself in that unfortunate situation, attorney Kelsey Eckert recommends you look into something called downtime compensation. Eckert says a lot of people don't know about it, and she explains what's involved in getting it. Then we all know that driving in bad weather conditions is part of the job, and while that usually doesn't lead to disaster, even relatively normal weather events can involve insurance considerations. We get the scoop from Trista Roby and Trina Skywalker of OOIDA's Truck Insurance Department. And finally, it's not Groundhog Day, but here we are again, facing another possible government shutdown. Bryce Mungen, OOIDA Director of Legislative Affairs, breaks down the latest from Washington, D.C., and the potential impact on the trucking industry. All that coming up on today's show. But first, the news. And I'm joined here in Studio A by Mark Schrimmer, Senior Editor at Landline Magazine. Mark, thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, always glad to be here.
So as we've told people before, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration is currently reviewing its guidance documents, looking into which ones are good the way they are, which ones need revising, which ones need to be axed. They just extended the comment period. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. But as a refresher, based on your reporting, what is FMCSA trying to do here? I guess we can start there.
So it all kind of starts with first kind of explaining what regulatory guidance is. You know, there's tons and tons of regulations on the books that motor carriers and truck drivers have to comply with. But a lot of times in that regulation, there are questions that arise of like, well, exactly what does this mean? How do I comply with it? And so FMCSA and, other agencies will create regulatory guidance to basically add clarity and explain how to comply with the rules. Now, what makes this a little bit tricky is that because they didn't go through a rulemaking process, they're not legally binding documents. So back in 2015, it was passed that every 5 years, all of the regulatory guidance by FMCSA has to be reviewed and has to go through this process to give truck drivers, industry stakeholders an opportunity to say, hey, I don't think that this is correct. We think you need to look at this. This one isn't necessary anymore. All those sorts of things. So that's what they're doing. They last did it in 2020, and now they're doing it here again in 2024. And to just give you kind of an idea of what we're talking about, there are 1,300 regulatory guidance documents.
Is that all?
That's all.
Okay.
So, you can see maybe why some people wanted this comment period extended.
Yeah, and it was extended. It was supposed to run through this Thursday, September 12th. It was extended for 2 weeks through the 26th.
Correct.
You mentioned just the sheer number of information documents out there. We also have had just 14 comments so far. I think that may be one reason FMCSA has extended the comment period. There's another reason as well, though, right?
Yeah, and I think really kind of the main basis is CVSA, asked to extend the comment period 60 days. And basically what they used as the reasoning was, hey, there's 1,300 of these guidance documents. Yeah. We need more time to review all of these and let you know which ones need updated. And so in the response, when they granted 14 days instead of the 60, one of the things that FMCSA did remind in there, though, that they'll accept petitions or comments at any time regarding their guidance documents. This is just for the review period that they have to do every 5 years. So that was one of the reasons I think they extended it only the 2 weeks as opposed to the 2 months. But yeah, so there's a lot of questions in there. A big one that CVSA has, tried to get some changes on is personal conveyance. That's been a big topic in recent years. They have petitioned FMCSA on that one in particular, I think each of the last 2 years, and it's been rejected both times. So I'm guessing that we'll see something from them on that again.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've got your thoughts on this and you want to comment, landline.media, you can check out Mark's story and I'll have a link to that there. Let's shift gears here a little bit. It's been a while since we talked about the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act in the House. We have a new co-sponsor. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. But Mark, let's do the same thing here. Let's remind folks about what the Got Truckers Act is and what it would do.
Yeah, so basically what it is there's an old time rule that exempts motor carriers from having to pay overtime to truck drivers, and this bill simply would remove that exemption, and company employee truck drivers would have to, all of their time be valued, and if any hours that they put in over 40, just like you or I, or anybody you work at McDonald's and any office in the country or whatever, you're likely going to over 40 hours, if you're not a salaried employee, are going to get overtime pay, and that's all that this would do. The point of it is to value a truck driver's time, and I think there are a lot of benefits to that. Also, safety in addition to what that would do, obviously, to your pocketbook.
Yeah, let's talk about that too, because OIDA does support this bill and has been supporting it from the very beginning. But there are folks out there who would see this and say, this doesn't really affect me. Why should I really care about this? But as you have pointed out before, this is a bill that would really benefit everybody in the industry.
Yeah. So, one of the things we hear is because this would only, affect company drivers, that sometimes owner operators will go, well, why does this matter to me? But there is a thing, if company drivers are their time is being valued, it will benefit. Ultimately, it will benefit owner operators too. They'll be able to, adjust their rates accordingly. The whole system will change a little bit if truck drivers' time is being valued. The other parts of it that I will say from a safety standpoint, and just issues in the industry we hear about all the time, detention time is something we hear all the time, being stuck at a shipper receiver facility. If your time is being valued and you're getting paid overtime, they're going to move faster. Mm-hmm. That's not going to happen. The turnover rates that we have in the industry, if you're being paid the way you should be and you're actually being valued, those will go down. And another big thing we hear about all the time is speeding. They want to bring in speed limiters. Instead, just removing that incentive to go in a little bit faster because you're being paid by mileage, that would help as well.
2 co-sponsors on that House bill now. We've got 5 on a Senate version. We'll keep an eye on that. Fightingfortruckers.com is the place to go if you want to reach out to your lawmaker and get them on board with this or any other trucking-related bill that's out there. Mark, we appreciate your time. We'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Our thanks once again to Mark Schrimmer of Landline Magazine for his time there. A couple other headlines we're following on this Tuesday, starting with diesel prices. They continue to slide. The national average dipping for a 9th straight week, this time by 7 cents to $3.55 a gallon. Prices were down last week in every single region EIA tracks, led by the Midwest, where the decline was 8.5 cents. And one more item of note, Marty Ellis is back on the road with the OOIDA Tour Truck this week. For 3 days starting on Thursday, he'll be at the Petro in New Paris, Ohio. That's near the I-70 U.S. Route 40 interchange, so stop in, say hi to Marty, and join OOIDA at a discount. Coming up next, if you've never heard of downtime compensation, you might be glad you did. If you ever find yourself in a wreck, attorney Kelsey Eckert joins us after the break to explain, so stick around. We're back right after this.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Capital Reman is your leading source for quality remanufactured engines and components. Capital Reman stands ready to serve all OOIDA members to help reduce costly engine repairs or replacement. Visit capitalreman.com today and use code OOIDA10 to save.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now, welcome back. There's nothing good about being involved in a wreck, but for many aspects of that situation, methods exist to compensate you for any loss. And a big one many people don't think of is what's called downtime compensation. That is essentially the money you didn't make because you were not able to run. That's always a bad situation, but downtime losses are especially frustrating when you're not the one at fault in the wreck. Kelsey Eckert is an attorney with Eckert & Associates who specializes in helping truckers get compensation in that kind of situation. She explained during a recent conversation what's involved. What do we mean by the term downtime compensation? For folks that maybe aren't aware, can you explain what that is?
Absolutely. Downtime is that time a truck or a trailer or other heavy equipment is down after an accident. Can't make any money while it's down, but all of those expenses continue. So it's a serious situation for so many owner-operators and small fleets when their primary equipment is out of business.
So let's talk about the getting the compensation, because, of course, I think a lot of folks have never even considered that they could. What are the circumstances when a trucker might be able to receive downtime compensation?
Sure. So the typical scenario is let's say our client's name is Tom, and Tom owns a truck and he pulls a trailer for someone else. Anyway, he's going down the road. He's minding his own business. He's in his lane. He's doing everything very safely, and somebody comes along and hits him. Let's say that's a four-wheeler. That car is insured by State Farm. State Farm and of course, after the accident, police say, yep, State Farm or the driver was at fault, and all is fine as far as the truck driver. So State Farm will understand how to fix the truck. They understand then when they get invoices for repairs, they pay that. But State Farm does not necessarily understand how to pay the downtime losses, those what they call loss of use, lost profits, business interruption. So those are terms that aren't thrown around a whole lot, except when somebody is in that situation. And a lot of people don't even know what it's called or that they have rights to it. The cool thing is that these losses are, according to state statutes, are almost across the whole United States. There's a couple of states that don't really allow for much payment on this, but primarily across the United States, truck drivers who have been hit in an accident have a right to go after the other side for their lost income.
I'm curious because I always hear about the insurance limits. And I mean, anybody that's looked over their policy has seen that you only have so much for this, so much for that, that the insurance company is committing to paying. Does that create a problem with getting downtime compensation out of a car policy?
It really does. It really does. So let's say that in that scenario with that four-wheel, it was, let's say that driver only had $5,000 of coverage. Oh, well, you knock out a light, there's $5,000. So oftentimes there's not nearly enough money to pay for the towing, the repairs, the hotel that might have been involved, the rental car, a rental truck, and then of course any other downtime losses, lost income. So it's a big deal. And with so many drivers out there, so many four-wheelers out there with little to no insurance, it's really important for your listeners to consider protecting themselves. And what does that mean? That can mean a couple different things. Of course, you can purchase downtime coverage. But oftentimes those types of policies across the board, all kinds of insurance companies, there's not a ton of coverage out there. It might be $2,000 or $5,000 of coverage. And a lot of our clients have $25,000 to $50,000 in loss if they're down for 2-3 months, that type of thing. So I believe an important additional coverage to add on is something called UMPD and UIMPD. So UMPD is uninsured motorist property damage coverage. That's when the other side has no coverage. Equally important is the UIMPD, which is underinsured motorist property damage coverage. So if that driver only had $5,000 in coverage, but you had $50,000 in downtime losses, presumably you'd be able to file a claim with your own insurance company for that $45,000 in difference.
Okay. Well, let's get back to pursuing this with the insurance company of the vehicle that hit you.
Yeah.
What are the steps that a trucker has to go through in order to pursue getting some kind of downtime compensation?
Sure. Well, a lot of folks will focus on the losses right up front, and that can be premature. Step number 1 is focusing on liability. You, as the victim, must prove that the other side was at fault. If you can't prove they were at fault, you might have $1 million in losses, but you're not going to get the first dollar. So 2 steps to every case. Step number 1, proving liability is on the other guy's shoulders and getting him and his insurance company to admit that in writing. And then secondly, then starting to focus on the downtime. I know a lot of our clients might, when they give us documents, they might be focusing on the accident itself. Here's what happened. And if the other side has admitted responsibility, we just move past that. I don't care how dumb they were, the other side at the accident scene or whatever. We're now going to focus on the timeline of what's happened from the date of the accident until that truck is moving again. And what ends up happening for a lot of our clients is the other side is saying, you didn't mitigate your losses. You didn't go out and try to rent a truck and things like that. So it's so important to keep a written diary, some kind of, I don't care what it's on, just as long as it's in writing on your computer, on your phone, of everything that you do to get back up and going. Because I love our clients. Our clients are salt of the earth, small business owners. They are not going and sitting on their couch eating bonbons while waiting for the world to, fix their truck and all this. They're out there humping it. They're doing what they need to do. And I applaud that. The problem is 2-3 years down the road, if this thing goes to trial, they're not going to remember what they were doing specifically. And that's why it's so important to keep a list. The other thing is we have a saying in our office, if it's not in writing, it never happened. So oftentimes, one of the big jobs of our client who's the victim is to actually contact rental companies, Ryder, Penske, maybe whoever they're leased to, those type of things, and ask for, do you have a rental? And so many of our clients, they have special equipment. Ryder or Penske isn't going to have. During COVID, they didn't have any equipment at all. And so rather than just calling Ryder and Penske and asking and getting denied, it's very important to email and get a denial in writing. Because again, 3 years down the road, when this is in front of a judge and the judge says, what did you do? And then we have these papers that say, Judge, they tried this place, they tried that place. It was impossible to mitigate their losses. It was impossible to go rent something to make their losses any smaller than it was.
I want to go back to something you mentioned a moment ago, and that is proving liability. And I would think a key part of that would be getting a hold of a police report. Do they generally, and again, it's been a long time since I've seen one, but generally speaking, don't they indicate the primary cause of the accident? Could that be something that would prove the liability of the other driver?
It's very helpful. A police report is very helpful. Of course, if again, with the State Farm driver, let's say the police report says the State Farm driver moved into the other lane, even got a ticket. State Farm could potentially still deny that claim, paying that claim, because State Farm and that auto driver have an insurance policy together. They have a contract. And that driver says that they will cooperate if there's ever a claim. If State Farm is contacting that driver and that driver's not responding, State Farm has an argument that they don't have to pay that claim, because so certainly the truck driver can file suit against that auto driver and probably get a judgment. But does that auto driver have any assets to go after as well? So that's always the thing, is to encourage the car driver to get with their insurance company to get this resolved so that they don't get themselves in a lawsuit.
One of the things I always think about when I talk to someone about this is just calculating your loss from downtime. Because in trekking, you may get one rate on one load and one rate on another. Mm-hmm. What is the process you have to do to calculate your actual losses from downtime?
Well, every guy out there is different, and every gal out there is different. Every company makes something different. We'll have one client that makes $500 a day, another that makes $1,000 a day, some that make a little more if they're even team drivers or hauling really special loads. And so a lot of times insurance companies, the adverse insurance companies, will say, we only pay rental rate, or we pay industry average of $150 a day. Well, that's garbage. That's absolutely garbage. And the losses from each of our clients is calculated in a custom way. And that's what I encourage all of your listeners to do as well. So everyone knows they have a history of what they've been making, and they know basically what they would have been making during that lost time. Very few of our clients have dedicated runs where they know exactly where they're going to be. They know where they would have been the entire downtime period. Most of our clients pull off of a load board. And so they might be in California one day, and New Jersey the next. Well, not that fast, but anyway, hopefully not. Anyway, so it's typically looking back at a history of what they were making on a daily basis and basically multiplying it by the number of days that they were down.
Well, that's all the questions I have. Is there anything else that you think is important for people to know, or that you just want to add?
So dash cams save the day all the time. So keep that dash cam on, make sure it's working. We have won so many cases that we would have lost otherwise because of the proof of liability that it was not the truck driver's fault. And if you don't have your dash cam on, if you're in a parking lot or whatever, check with other drivers to see if they had their dash cam on, because that can make or break a case.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. All right. Take care, Mark.
That was Kelsey Eckert, an attorney with Eckert & Associates, who specializes in helping truckers get compensation for downtime. If you have questions about the topic, you can contact Eckert & Associates at 904-278-7688 or go to their website, downtimeclaims.com. Again, that phone number is 904-278-7688 or go to their website, downtimeclaims.com. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Truckdown.com. Whenever you have a breakdown, you need Truckdown.com. 24/7 access to 40,000 verified heavy-duty repair vendors nationwide. Repair secured. Load assured. Truckdown.com.
Firestone tires are for more of everything, with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Learn more at bridgestonenationalfleet.com/4moremiles.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a cat scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forgiveness, accuracy, weigh your truck on a cat scale.
Landline now. Welcome back. Like tires, fuel, and an engine, insurance is one of those things you just have to have for your truck. But not all insurance is created equal. I'm here now with Trina Skywalker and Trista Roby of OOIDA's Truck Insurance Department to answer some questions. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, Mark.
Well, hello to you, and glad to have you here with us. Our topic today involves some of the considerations you have to take into account if you encounter inclement weather. And that's a phrase that can mean a lot of things. So maybe we ought to define here what we mean in this context by inclement weather.
Yeah, so we're talking about things like storms, flash flooding, tornadoes, hurricanes. You know, all of those kind of things could fit into kind of a disaster type situation.
Okay. And how bad can just even a plain old thunderstorm get in terms of how it affects your operation or your vehicle?
Well, I think that's kind of what we want to dissect, today, because inclement weather obviously would be like a thunderstorm or something of that nature. But whether or not it's considered an act of God versus something that you could have prevented, that's kind of where it gets a little more dicey. That's where the fine lines are. So if there's a thunderstorm and maybe your equipment is hit by lightning, that's an act of God. That's non-preventable.
Yeah, unless you put a lightning rod on top of the truck.
That's fair. That's fair. I won't say it's never happened. I don't know. I don't know. But sometimes when there are weather events, there are preventative measures that can be taken. Sometimes there's not. But if you're driving in the thunderstorm and, maybe you hydroplane because there's so much water on the road, that's not necessarily going to be considered an act of God. It's still inclement weather, but, it's a little different in how it's viewed as a claim, I guess.
And maybe even how it affects your record or that sort of thing.
Now, a lot of the concern, I think, is not just the truck, but also the load itself. And there are circumstances where inclement weather can affect the load and maybe create some problems there. Can you give some examples?
Well, I mean, really the perfect example to that is you're driving through your typical rainstorm and, you're not having any problems with wind or hail or anything like that would necessarily cause an accident, but then realize that your load wasn't tarped properly or something came untarped during that transit, and now you've got, the wet cargo, possibly even rust.
Right. If it's a load of steel, on a flatbed, and like Trista said, it's not covered properly.
Yeah, or if you've maybe not maintained that trailer so well and you've got a leak in the roof on a dry van.
True.
That could end up being kind of a serious problem.
Yeah, that's a really good point, too.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. If you have that kind of circumstance where you simply have not fixed a leak, that's not going to be act of God, is it?
No, it is not. And that's something where you really need to refer to your policy wording and see if because you've improperly maintained your equipment, that kind of thing would even be covered.
Okay. Let's now look at the truck itself. I mean, we talked about, just typical stuff. But let's say you have flooding, and flooding can be caused by something far less than a tornado or hurricane. Sure. You can simply have just heavy rainfall. So give us an idea here of where the line is. I mean, what is your responsibility to avoid floodwaters? What is considered an act of God in that case?
Well, obviously we've been through some of those situations with, several different hurricanes, and there's been some bad ones. And at the end of the day, your safety is most important. So, your insurance company typically isn't going to be like, you have to get this equipment out, at the risk of your own safety. If you cannot get your equipment to a safer location in a timely manner, That's one thing. But we've also seen the situations where someone has intentionally parked their equipment in a not affected area, but knowing that that area could be affected. We've seen that too. And so I think that's just going to come down to claim time. And, anytime there's a claim, the insurance company is going to research it. There's going to be adjusters. There's going to be all kinds of different people looking into that, different factors. And I'm not even saying it would be denied, but like I said, we have seen that difference. So as far as what you need to do in the event of a storm or a weather event that's impending, it's really just going to depend. Do you have time to maybe try and get the equipment maybe in a garage or a storage facility? Not everyone even has that option, and not everyone's even going to have time to do that.
Or even on a smaller level, can or should you pull over? Would it be safer to find a spot to pull over? Safer for you, safer for others, and safer for your equipment. So those are the kinds of things, like Trina said, they might not necessarily be denied, but it's probably going to prolong the claim to research it.
Well, and potentially reflect on you in the future. If you're coming up for renewal, and I say potentially because honestly, it's hard to say for sure what's going to happen moving forward. But if it's obvious that you could have taken measures that you didn't take or something of that nature, it could have an impact later on.
I would think, too, that the predictability of a storm, for example, tornadoes tend to be sudden, unpredictable, fast-moving.
Correct.
Whereas, say, a hurricane, sometimes you could have several days warning.
Sure.
As that thing comes in to get your truck out of that area.
Right.
Another thing I was thinking about is something I've seen, which is when you've got flooded roads, and sometimes this happens after the storm has passed, but the road's flooded, and I have seen people take full-size semis and just dive right into those floodwaters to try and plow through it.
Right.
And you don't know how deep it is. You could end up being flooded out.
Absolutely. A lot of us think we can make it through a little bit of standing water,
Yeah, I think it's turn around, don't drown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I follow it. But, the other thing to take into consideration in those type of situations is if you are in an accident, are you going to be cited for wrongdoing? So if you're cited for something like unsafe driving or failure to maintain, something along those lines, then that could affect things even further.
And we see that a lot. It kind of stinks for the driver. And I say kind of because I know their intention isn't to drive too fast for conditions, but that's such a broad ticket. There's a posted speed limit and then there's too fast for conditions. Well, what's too fast for conditions? What's your perception of that versus the individual writing the citation? Like Trista said, you could be going really slow and maybe trying to get through some standing water. And if you have an accident, you could be cited no matter what speed you're going.
I think you also, in some of the notes you sent over earlier, gave a pretty good standard when you're in, say, a heavy rainstorm of when you should pull over. And I thought that was a very good one. Can you kind of describe what you said there?
Oh, yeah, sure. It's kind of along the lines of what we've been discussing. Sometimes you can only go 25 miles an hour. And most of us have been in the situation where you cannot see. Your windshield wipers don't operate fast enough, and a lot of people do pull over until it's cleared up. I've been in situations in a personal vehicle where maybe stop at a rest stop or at a truck stop, under some sort of an awning. But, if you are unable to pull over or choose not to pull over in that kind of situation, that's usually when you could get cited for too fast for conditions. And we've seen people who try to muscle through it and they wind up, jackknifed or hydroplaned or rolling the equipment. There's a plethora of things that could happen.
Well, and even in the pulling over situation, you definitely need to consider safety for pulling over and making sure you're pulled over
Absolutely.
in a safe space, because we all know you can't see a foot ahead of you. So if you come upon a vehicle that's parked half on the road, and another vehicle ends up, hitting that, the vehicle that was half on the road and parked is going to be considered partially, if not completely, at fault during that investigation.
Right.
And there are situations, and I think, again, we either have been in or know people who have been in, where you can't tell.
Right.
I mean, you need to act before it gets to that point.
Exactly.
Well, and it's not indicative that you're not a good driver when you have to do that. But the problem is we also all know, or at least have seen on the road, the people that think it's okay to go faster. And so you're being mindful of what you're doing and making sure you can see. But yet there might be another vehicle that, thinks they're speed racer, or, thinks it's not as bad and is maybe weaving through traffic. There's a number of things that could happen. So you're having to be cautious for that too, and what other people are doing around you.
Absolutely.
Which is obviously harder for a semi-truck and blind spots and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you're at the point where you can't tell when you're on or off the road.
Right.
You're probably
over the center line.
You're probably too late.
Correct.
Right.
I would think that part of this too would be, do companies look at things like what the weather report was when they look at whether someone is at fault in a situation like that? Like if they did have a weather report that there was heavy rain coming?
I think it's typically on the police report at least.
Yeah, if there's a police report, usually the conditions, depending on the state, and that sort of thing, conditions are like a check mark box. And I will say that when we're looking at their history, and I'm assuming when companies are looking at the history, that's one of the first places we go. And we say, oh, well, this was this kind of accident, but it was in the middle of, rush hour traffic in a superstorm or something along those lines.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors to be taken into consideration. And like you said, you brought up earlier, having several days notice when there's a hurricane or something of that nature. Those are the ones where we see the most, like maybe someone has moved their equipment to that location, because you do have so much notice. It's not like other weather events, snowstorms or icy roads or things of that nature. So that's when we've seen a little more discrepancy. And I want to point out real quick, and this is one of the things I thought of when you said that, we do have some folks that try to add that equipment to the policy when that notice is given. And not all insurance companies would let you add your equipment. So that's something to be very mindful of too. Some of them will say, okay, if anyone calls to add equipment to the policy during this time frame, we are unable to do it.
And they're in this area where the bulletin has been released for. Usually once that bulletin's released, the insurance company sort of puts a stop on being able to make any changes to the policy during that time.
So people actually call you after the hurricane warning, for example, is out and say, gosh, I want to add my trailer now.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's not an uncommon call, actually. I would say the most common call we get in that situation are people saying, I've got to get my family out. We've got our personal vehicle. What do we do with our truck? How do we, what if we can't get our truck out of here? So I would say that's the more common call that we get, but we definitely get the call during that bulletin to add equipment.
Wow. Certainly something to think about, and certainly something to plan ahead for.
Yes. If you can.
Well, ladies, we are out of time here. I want to thank you both. It's excellent information. And, of course, we're at the height of hurricane season.
Right.
So definitely something people need to be aware of.
Yes. Yeah.
Okie doke. I've been talking with Trina Skywalker and Trista Roby of OOIDA's Truck Insurance Department. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
If you're running ultra-low sulfur diesel in your vehicle, make sure you are prepared and protected all winter long with Howes Diesel Treat, the #1 anti-gel product in North America from the 100-plus year trusted brand Howes Products.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Welcome back. We're on the home stretch of the show today. We'll close things out by taking a short trip to Washington, D.C., where a funding bill is in the spotlight. As for what that means with regard to trucking issues, Bryce Mungin is about to tell us. Bryce is OOIDA's Director of Legislative Affairs, and he joins us on the line from the nation's capital now. Bryce, how we doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing just fine. Thanks for talking with us. We were talking earlier. It feels like Groundhog Day. Seems like it was yesterday that we were talking about a government funding bill and a possible shutdown. And here we are again, Bryce. What are we looking at here in terms of the timeline? Let's start there.
Yeah, I know. We had to go back through and figure out, because it seems like we're talking about these things at seemingly every few months. But yes. Yeah. So we're coming up at the end of the month here on September 30th is when the federal fiscal year ends. So in a perfect Schoolhouse Rock version of the world, Congress would have passed their 12 separate appropriations bills or funding bills that would have funded all the different agencies and activities before the end of this month. President signs them into law and everyone goes on their way. But what has been practiced really for at least a decade now, if not going back further, is that Congress has not passed all those bills individually. And that, in fact, very few of them have been passed at all. And so we're in a situation where funding is running out at the end of this month. And when that runs out, if no new legislation is enacted, the government, by and large, shuts down because they don't have the funding they need to operate. So the timeline here, they have a few weeks now to get this taken care of, but basically they have to get the government funded before the end of the month.
Yeah, and again, we were looking it up. This was nearly a year ago that we were having this conversation, and they did find a resolution there. In this case, we'll be talking about a continuing resolution, I believe, which is a term that has really come into play a lot in recent years here. For people out there who may not know, what exactly does that mean? And I guess what does that mean for the whole process as it stands?
Yeah. So in simple terms, a continuing resolution is really an extension of funding at the existing level. So it's basically saying we're going to continue funding the government for the levels that were provided for in the current fiscal year for a set period of time. So it's a stopgap measure. It's good for the federal government in that it keeps things running, keeps things functioning. But the drawback to that is it doesn't allow for Congress to implement any funding changes, any kind of policy changes or tweaks that need to be made. So lawmakers come up on this as a sort of last resort because, again, it keeps the lights on, but at the same time, it's not updating policy decisions that might need to be fixed.
Now, as for why we care about this in the context of trucking and transportation, we're talking, of course, about funding the USDOT here, at least in that context. What specifically are you and OOIDA kind of keeping an eye out for when it comes to funding the USDOT moving forward here?
Yeah, and so actually USDOT is one of it's a bit of an anomaly when it comes to the government funding because a lot of the funding that USDOT takes in and then gives back out comes in through the Highway Trust Fund, and so it's not dependent on these annual appropriations bills. So if a government shutdown were to happen, at least immediately, there wouldn't be a huge effect on USDOT. With that said, there's a number of policies, kind of like I was just alluding to, that we would like to see updated as part of the annual appropriations process. So one of the things we're keeping an eye on is the House funding bill for USDOT included a set-aside for a couple $1 million for truck parking expansion. So ultimately, if as Congress continues to debate the funding bill, we would like to see that signed into law. Something else that's in the House bill that we'd really like to see is a prohibition on a speed limiter mandate. So that's something we've fought very hard for, and it's a funding prohibition that says FMCSA and USDOT, you are not allowed to use any of the funding you're getting for this next year to work on a speed limiter mandate. So those are just a few of the things. But like I said, with this continuing resolution, those policies and those debates are kind of temporarily put on the side.
Yeah, and those debates are taking place, obviously, within the halls of Congress there.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to ask you, just in hearing you talk there, and, you mentioned all the issues that OOIDA is tracking and fighting for or fighting against in some cases here. These are conversations that you're continuing to have, pretty much every day with lawmakers, right? And I imagine you're in their ear when they're having conversations or thinking about this continuing resolution or a shutdown or funding. Those conversations are taking place, right? OOIDA is actively engaged in those, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, talking about the funding bills, it's a good example of the way that we're not just working every issue in a single way, but we're looking for any opportunity to advance OOIDA's interests. We have standalone legislation on the speed limiter mandate, so a bill that would straight up just prohibit FMCSA and DOT from issuing a speed limiter mandate. But at the same time, we know maybe there's an opportunity to get this done as part of the funding process. And at the same time we're working on this, we're keeping an eye out for, in the next 2 years or so, Congress is going to be looking at a new highway bill or a new, infrastructure funding and transportation policy bill. So we've got a couple different things going on at once. So things are never still. There's usually never just one way to get something done. And you're right. That's part of the way that we keep these issues moving and keep the conversation going.
Let's look ahead here to where we may be headed. I know the first bill offered by the GOP leadership in the House probably has some non-starters for their colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Can you talk a little bit about the process right now and what that first bill looks like?
Yes, and so the first bill that's been introduced and that they plan to vote on in the House this week is a continuing resolution that goes through the beginning of next year, through the first few months of next year. And it also pairs it together with some immigration or election-related policy. And so there's questions, as you alluded to. It doesn't seem likely that there will be much, if any, Democratic support in the House for that combination package there. And certainly there's almost not the support of 60 senators, which is needed to overcome a filibuster in that chamber. So it's difficult to see how this legislation, as it's written right now, would be signed into law or would pass both chambers. I think there's even some questions. There's some Republicans who have concerns about spending and just kind of keeping things on autopilot. They don't want to see the government just, continue writing checks without revisiting policy. So it's unclear how this even progresses through the House this week. But this is not unexpected. Other times when we've watched these funding debates, these bills go back and forth. So this is the Republicans it's their opening bid. They control the House, so they're putting this forward. If it passes, I expect we'll see a stripped-down funding bill come back from the Senate, and the House will take it up from there. So this is all part of the negotiations. They do, at this point, like I said, have a few weeks before the end of the month, so we'll see where we are then. We're not quite up to the deadline, but I expect that we'll see them trade bills over the next few weeks here, at least trade some ideas.
We got a little less than a minute here, Bryce. I do want you to break out your crystal ball for us for a second here. No one knows what's going to happen, obviously, by the end of this month with all of this, but do you get a sense of where we might be headed by September 30th?
Yeah, I think we'll probably be in a place where Congress will be in a place where they pass some sort of short-term continuing resolution, pushing it past the elections in November. I don't think that there's any lawmakers that really want to be dealing with this in the lead up to the election. And I think by punting it till after then, they can kind of clear the table and take this off. Again, just because they don't want to have to be dealing with a government shutdown right now, especially when a lot of them want to be back home campaigning as well. So I think that's how it'll shake out after trading some proposals back and forth.
All right, we got a Bryce guarantee on that. We'll see where we are about a month from now. Bryce, we appreciate
we'll run it back later.
Yeah, exactly. Bryce, we appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you again soon.
Yep. Thank you.
Our thanks to Bryce Mungin of OOIDA. And a quick reminder, if you want to get your elected reps on board with important trucking legislation, head to fightingfortruckers.com. That website, one more time, fightingfortruckers.com. And with that, we'll say goodbye for today. We thank you for listening. Until next time, take care.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome, and I am
a
professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit ooida.com.